So I wanted to make another video. Um, I was thinking of some interviews that I had gone to, and I recall this is for Mikayla. I don't know what this even meant at that time, but I think I was 30 years old. It was before I was maybe like 29. I was 29 years old, I think, at the time, and I went 29 to 30 years old, no older than 30, 29 or 30 years old. And I went to an interview um, that was called, I think, the name of Craft. And it was like, it wasn't like Craft, the food product. I think it was like a home interiors kind of company where they made baby cribs and made like furniture, inside home furniture or something like that, kind of like IKEA or rooms to go kind of company. And it was a really good company, and I think it was like for like a it had like really good benefits. And I went into this interview, and I didn't just interview one person. It was like three people I interviewed, and there was a real female that was it went in there. It was a brunette. It was a brunette, brown-eyed female. And when I walked in there, I was, it was probably one of the better interviews because it was a good company. And I spoke to them for like 30 minutes, and they were asking stuff about like my family, like a little bit. And the female, she was a pretty girl. She was a female for sure. And when I went in there, she first told me, she said her name was Mikayla. Now, I don't know what are the odds of finding another girl that is named Mikayla with brown eyes, brown hair, and real pretty. And I said, Mikayla? And she kind of looked at me kind of weird, kind of like, oh no, he knows or he doesn't or something. But you got to understand, at 29 years old, I have no idea I have a sister. And they asked me, and I said, "Oh, I have a few other like." I think I had said I grew up with three brothers, and had and some other. My father had already had another wife with three other kids, and everything to me is just casual. They're just asking, so for the job position, it was like a print operator or something. It was something that had to do with printing, but it wasn't a printing company, but they had in like a printing operator position there. And the lady told me that her father had just died. She goes, yeah, my father just died. And I don't remember, but I want to say that's what she said. And if she told me that her father had just died, could she have meant that my father died when I was about 29 years old or 30 years, like my father had just died 12 years ago? It could have been. Like, I don't find that to be a coincidence. So I think it's important because, my honest opinion, I don't know anything about my biological father other than what I've shared in videos and what little information I know. But I don't know. I have reason to believe that I don't think he's still alive. I mean, if he's still alive, he would have to be very, very old. I mean, he would have to be like at least like 70 years old now, and at least that age. So, um, that lady, I remember telling me, she goes, yeah, my father just died. And so, the way that this heterosexual lady, she was with two other guys, I think it was two other males, but the female led the conversation. And I don't have any reason to suspicion anything because I showed her my resume, we talked, and that was it. And I said that, yeah, I don't have any sisters that I know of. Maybe I have and I said something like that, and I remember her looking at me, and she goes, kind of like, oh, I don't think he knows he has a sister. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because if someone is bringing up Mikayla, in a job interview and saying her name is Mikayla and that her dad just died. And this is right after the whole raping situation and the electronic devices that shot me and Patricia and this transgender that I ended up sleeping with and all the stuff that happened. I know nothing about this whole, like, I don't know anything about this whole Mikayla, my biological father. I have no ideas, and they're asking me questions. So I think it's important for Mikayla to know there was other people involved. I mean, besides of the whole trail of things that have all happened, um, I'd never been to a job interview where it was particularly this way. But the lady I remember distinctly said that she said that her father just died, and I don't know if my biological father had just died or died recently, and they were just bringing it up because maybe it affected Mikayla, and whoever was talking to Mikayla, it affected the family, and they found out, and so they wanted to see if I knew. So they knew that I didn't know my sister was Mikayla and I had a different biological father. They had no idea. They probably knew I had no idea by just asking the questions, because they were like, because it's a family oriented kind of company where you build family products for like internal furniture. But I thought I would say something. There was a lot of people involved. Wow, you got to understand that I have no idea that any of this exists. So I have no reason to question. There's everything's normal to me, other than obviously I'm pleading for a job and doing my best for the job interview and to get hired. I ended up not getting hired, but I think it was important for me to talk about. And I was 29 years old. This is about 12, 13 years ago. So maybe that's when my biological father died. Maybe that's when he passed away. But you know, it's a it's a very weird entanglement because I don't know that I have a different body. I entirely up until I was about 35, that maybe 34. See, I know I was in Alaska, Denver. I was about 34 years old to 35 when I found out that I had a different biological father. So I have no reason to ever think for any reason that anyone is suspicious about anything, because he's my biological father, Raymond Paloma. That's how I was raised. So, and I was real close to him. We shared the same birthday and everything. But I thought I would share this story about Mikayla being mentioned. There was a girl that walked in that said her name was Mikayla, and she was a real female. She was a pretty girl, and uh, real females behave more emotionally connected and more caring and loving, and 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 when it comes to this particular type of touchy subjects. So I think it's important for me to talk about. I don't know if he's still. Am I searching for my biological father? I'm not really in the search. I hope he's still alive. I mean, I hope but I have so many reasons to believe, because so many people were bad mouthing him, and I have no idea who this man is. I have no idea who this individual is. But I know they were talking very bad about him, very bad. Like they kept on scumming him, and and putting him in his place in the reference of what I think of who my father is. But it doesn't affect me because I have no idea what they're talking about when they think that I do know and I don't. So I think it's important, Mikayla, for whatever it is. Um, I'm trying to think of any other places that Mikayla strictly, directly, her name got referenced to me. There was dozens of places. There were so many people that were bringing up Mikayla to me at my job sites and other references and asking me questions, and I have no idea. So, I think it's important. My biological mother and her triplets would probably want to know this, but she, besides of all the situations of her being mentioned throughout my grade school and all kinds of circumstances. So, I think it's important. So, I'm trying to think of any other places that her name got mentioned directly, but I went to a company, and it was a home interior, like they sold like baby cribs. I think it was like baby cribs and baby products and stuff, majority of it for home, like a rooms to go kind of place. And it was a facility, kind of warehouse, but it was a air conditioned, humidity controlled environment. I went into the office and it was kind of like an oval office, but Mikayla got mentioned to me. I don't think it's very weird to mention in a job interview, especially the boss or the person that is doing the interviews being a woman, saying that her father just died. So I think that could have been because one of the things that I find is also suspicious is when I was there used to be this guy by the name of Charles, real skinny guy, very cool, late, real skinny, but real skinny. And he used to work for a nursing home. And he's a real cool guy. Like, you know, we argued a little bit, but he was flamboyant, but he was just chill. And I lived with him for like 6 months. And I remember I was living there, and he ended up breaking the lease and leaving and going somewhere else. And I ended up living at that apartment for like 3 weeks, and ended up having to leave. And this is when I first got homeless. And one day, my mother, well, it wasn't my mother. I think it was an identical twin, but I didn't know at the time that my mother was triplets. And I was 30 years old, and that was the last time I was living in an apartment. That I had never been homeless up until then. I started being homeless from then on out all the time, and that was the last time because that was very. And I remember signing a lease. I remember signing a lease when I went to the office, and gosh, I want to say maybe that group, because I don't know, people were giving me fake names. If that's what was going on, I was just thinking maybe that lady too also gave me another name at Mikayla. But anyway, I went with this guy. We went in there, talked to the front office, signed. I was co-signer, and he signed, and we signed a lease. But when I was living at that apartment, like a couple months, like a month or two before I moved out, he moved out. He moved out, and I stayed there a month, and then for like 3 weeks, and then I ended up having to leave because electricity got cut off, and I couldn't afford it. But my mother called me one day, and it was kind of a gloomy day, and my mother told me, and she said, Hector, someone who really cared about you has just died. And she told me in a way that I have no idea who she's talking about. I have no idea. Like, to me, I'm thinking like a coworker, because all this chaos is going on. I don't know who they're talking about. Maybe it was like a distant relative, but she didn't tell me who it was. She just told me, and just, Hector, someone who really cared about you, is who liked you a lot, now is died. And it was very real. Like, it was not joking. It was very real. Like, someone just who really cared about you has died now. And it was just real quiet over the phone. And she didn't say, she goes, no, and I don't know what else she said that. She goes, oh, okay. And I think she brought me some food the next day or later. She was like, I'll come by and I'll bring you some food or something like that. I don't know what it was. But I think it's important for me to talk about, because because that was right exactly around the time when I had that job interview. I had that job interview at Kraft, and that lady said she named her Mikayla, and she said her father just died. And I don't know, given the fact that my biological father's never been a part of my life ever, in my opinion, the little that I saw him behave and all the actions that we're taking, especially when you get older, I do believe that he would say, tell Hector I love him. Tell Hector I did care for him before I die. And that's, because he would have had a lot of admiration for his daughter, Mikayla, because there's nothing more treasurable than, your sweet daughter whenever you're a man and you have kids. And, there's boys are always kind of like scattered, right? We don't ever get much love from it, but girls always do. And that would have been his princess. So it would have been very real and understanding to me to think to myself that maybe he died, and that's what my mother was saying, that he died, and my mother was my mother's twins, like he didn't want to take any relationship or affect my personal life because that's the father that I grew up with, Raymond Palomo, and who he gave me up to. So his nice last final words would have been like, just tell Hector I love him, and I that I haven't didn't forget about you or something. Very something simple, just that your life mattered, and things ended up happening the way that they ended up happening in, and we couldn't do anything about it. So, but I remember my mother telling me that he died, like someone died, and she said it like it was a guy, like, and I don't know why, like the way the conversation, I think I remember thinking to myself that it was like a relative, like someone that was connected to me, like a relative. But I thought I'd talk about this. I don't know if I think because it's so weird because right when my mother said that, it was like, I want to say it was like a couple of months. It was like a couple of months before that when I had that job interview, and this girl by the name of Mikayla, who I went into the to do the interview with, said that her father just died. And I was 29 years old. I was 29 years old. I want to say it was like right before or right after I lived with this guy named Marcus in Carrollton, next to Tato's house, or over on Queens Chapel and Farmers Branch. But I thought I would say something about that, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, maybe that's what my biological father wanted to say before he died. I don't know. I find it very difficult because you can't have a child like he probably knew at some point, in my opinion. Assume, could be wrong, that his daughter died. I knew it's hard for me to believe, to think to myself that my biological father wouldn't have just didn't care, because if he has a little girl, he's going to be nervous that a lot of guys are going to come after her and want to do harmful things, right? Every father does that with their daughters, right? And if he felt emotions and he knew I was still alive, there's no reason why he wouldn't have felt something in saying, he has some responsibility at some degree, whether it was whatever degree that was in, minimal degree that was probably in. Because I look just like him and I carry the same name as him. That's why my mother named me after him. My mother directly told me, she said, and I was with her, she says, no, I named you Hector. He goes, your name's Hector. I put Hector. I put Hector there. I put your name Hector. I wanted your name to be Hector. And that's what my mother told me when I was about, gosh, I was like 9 or 10 years old when she told me that. And anyway, I thought I'd make a video. I have reason, I could never, there's just too many stories of people that kept on scumming him because I don't know, like, people think I know. Like, let me tell you another story. I'm at PBK, I'm 23, I'm 24 years old. I'm working for an architectural firm. When I'm working for this architectural firm, there's a girl by her, and she said, my husband's name's Hector as well. He's from Brazil. This is one of the reasons I think that my biological father is from Brazil. And I was working at PBK, and I remember I was a site manager working with the architects. And I remember there was a guy that came in that looked a lot like my biological father. But I remember she said that she goes, me and my husband, we're from Brazil. He goes, we are from Brazil. So this is one of the reasons I think that my biological father is from Brazil. But I don't know. To me, it's still totally clueless. I still don't know. But the way that this lady told me, because she was pregnant, and I don't know if I want to say they named their baby Hector as well. They named their baby Hector, and she told me this. And I remember I didn't really work with her, so she intentionally came over to engage in a friendly conversation with me. And she was a very pretty girl. And they were educated. They're from Brazil. She was from Brazil, but a very light complected, white looking woman. But she said that she goes, yeah, my husband is from Brazil. And so I thought I would make a conversation about this. There's countless times. Now, he didn't get scummed there. There there was just a lot of places I could go on in conversation where they kept on bad mouthing him. And I didn't, you got to understand, like, why they keep referencing, like, they talking about somebody I know, but I have no idea. Raymond Palomo is always my biological father, my father who raised me. I had no reason to believe anything else. So I thought I'd make a video on this, Mikayla. I hope, if he is for some reason of a 1 in a million still alive, I hope he's healthy. And one of the reasons I also think he may be still alive is, which is very, I just don't feel like he's alive anymore. He might be, but I recall I was speaking to this girl, Lindsay, who just a couple of days was telling me, fuck you, like over the fucking phone, and was her identical twin or some shit. Anyway, a couple of days, about a week ago, I talked to her, and we're in January, January 20th, right now, 2026. She said, yeah, my dad's about to die. And I thought, when she said it out of nowhere, and I kind of think, is she referencing that my biological father's about to die? Like, my biological father's right now very old. He's fine. Whether he surrendered what he ever surrendered, emotionally, mentally, and everything that's going on, that maybe he's still alive now. He's just really old and about to die. And I don't know which psychology tricks or persecution, I don't know, but she had said that, and I kind of thought to myself, is my biological father still alive, and he's getting very old and getting close to dying? So I say this because there's a lot of persecution going on in this house, but I stay in my room, keep my mouth shut, and just stick to what I need to stick to. And anyway, hope I get to complete my GED on another note, but I find that very weird. I remember that very distinctively. And that lady said her name was Mikayla. And I want to say I went into this apartment when I was at Forest Cove Apartments, not even too far from here. And it's like a couple miles from here. And I was living there with Charles, and we went to the apartment. And I want to say she said that her name was Mikayla, the apartment lease manager. It's very weird, but you got to understand, there's nothing for me to believe this. You got to understand, in my mind, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's normal for me. So if you start bringing up things, I don't even question it unless there's too much attitude, or like, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about. But anyway, I thought I'd say something. My mother, if she did not like that man, she would have not named me or even said anything, because she told me, I was like 9 or 10 years old, and she told me that this guy that lived 2 houses down from us was studying to be an 18-wheeler driver. She told me this, but she said it in a way like she was proud. And I remember her sitting on a couch. She said, ese señor ya está estudiando para manejar 18-wheelers. Yeah. So anyway, I thought I would say something about this, because I remember that very well. So whatever it is that turns into this situation, I can't do anything about. I just hope the best, and I pray for the best. I have to leave it up to God. It's out of my control.